Nihilism, suicide, and terrorism are synonyms. They are not a political doctrine, rather, they are the failure of politics. It is an endgame, yet it cannot be said that after it comes nothing. It is the nothing. After it comes a new beginning, a new nomos. What, therefore, is the path to that new nomos? Welcome to the New Nomos, a podcast with me, Abdallah Dutton, on a quest to understand what the New Nomos is and what we need to get there. Here we are at the start of a new year, which seemed to be the right time to make a slight tweak to this podcast. This journey will continue from where we left off last year, just with a new name, but the form and the format will stay the same. And so we find ourselves at the sense of taste. And with that obviously comes food, and with food comes the idea of hospitality. Hosting people, feeding people, and honoring guests. Now in my life, nowhere has this been as exemplified than by the life and daily practice of Dr. Ian Dallas. And who better to explore this idea with than Chef Yusuf, the man who was Dr. Dallas's personal chef for over 16 years. I've had the honor and great pleasure of enjoying his food on numerous occasions, and if you want to get an idea of how he has mastered his craft and the beauty of the dishes he creates, have a look at his Instagram at Chef Joseph Perez, which will give you a deeper understanding of his journey. Without much further ado, I present to you episode 23, Dr. Dallas's Table, Time, Discipline, and the Art of Hospitality.
Dr. Dallas took a lot of time of his time and he put it towards food, Like talking about Dr. Dallas, if you ask me what has been your experience, what have you seen Dr. Dallas do on an everyday basis is food. Like he built everything around food, for saying it somehow, like it was a very important event every day. He will take a portion of his time to discuss the recipes with me, discuss the menu, discuss where we're going to get the ingredients and what ingredients, and discuss who were the guests coming, so we will cook for the occasion. It was everything about cooking for the occasion and creating an occasion. And so the importance that he gave to the food is huge. It's something that he did every day. It wasn't a day that he slacked. And to create that atmosphere, bringing the people together to eat and creating that atmosphere that allow other things to grow from. There was a lot of occasions where there was great discussions that happened after lunch, and people were very excited about what they're saying, and they were talking with passion, and there was like an atmosphere of like things happening, and sometimes he would look at me and he said like, this is all because of you, and of course it was because of the food, and also the energy that I brought into the food, and the energy that the food brought into the room and into the people that were partaking into that meal. So apart from food being delicious and being a joy and being a way to help, and is also a key element in politics, for example, in philosophy, in just having good company and having a good time. Like food will always raise the bars up if the food is done correctly, and if the food is done with what we call baraka, with love and with understanding, and if you cook for the occasion, then it brings that up in you, that je ne sais quoi, just make you thrive.
So you were Dr. Ian Dallas's personal chef for 16 years. How did you come to be his chef?
Well, that's that's a little bit of an adventure, you know. I mean, when I was in my hometown in Granada, I just wanted to travel and explore and to get out of my city, learn English as well. So I came to South Africa and I met Dr. Dallas in my sister's wedding, and we had an encounter, and he asked me like what I was doing, and he saw that I didn't really have like a particular direction in that point in time, so he invited me to come to South Africa. I still didn't know I was going to cook, but I took his advice and I came to South Africa.
How old were you?
I was the first time I came I was 16, and then I came back when I was 17. So I was just 17, and yeah, I came to South Africa, and 2 weeks after I was in South Africa, the former chef of Dr. Dallas approached me and asked me if I wanted to help him in the kitchen. So yeah, I mean, I accepted. I saw it as an opportunity to stay in South Africa and fulfill my goal, which was learning English. And at that time, I didn't have a particular passion for food, but I do remember helping my mother in the kitchen a lot. In regarding the food, you know, I prefer to cook than clean dishes. But one of the things that I realized that I also love is feeding. I love feeding people, but not just people. I used to love feeding animals, and I still do. You know, when you give a horse a whole apple, and you know that crunchy noise and that face of happiness, you know, I really enjoy that. I used to enjoy like even cooking for my dog. You know, I had a dog that used to be my friend, you know, and I used to cook for him. You know, I used to buy ingredients such as like broken rice that they sell very cheap, and then I go to the butcher and I ask for the bones, and then I put wherever vegetables they were going off, and I put everything into a pot and I will cook it for my dog. And then when I feed it, I will have a satisfaction by seeing him eating the food and making all these noises. And even plants, you know, I I love, you know, when I see a plant that is thirsty, you know, you just go there and throw some water, you know, and I get a satisfaction out of it. So I mean, I did have previous contact with food and everything, but I didn't discover that passion for food and for the culinary world yet. But yeah, after 6 months of being with this chef in the kitchen and trying to learn what I could, because there was a big language barrier. I couldn't speak English and this person didn't speak Spanish. So yeah, it was a process of adaptation, I would say, these first 6 months. And then without previous notice, this chef left, and yeah, and was no one to cook food for that date. So I make a poulet aux onions, a recipe of Marberak, and Dr. Dallas really enjoyed it, and he offered me the job of being his chef. Or I mean, at the time I was just a cook, but he gave me the title right away, and he saw that I could become that. So yeah, I became his personal cook at the age of 17. In the beginning, it was really hard because I couldn't speak English. I didn't know how to cook. I mean, I just saved the day by cooking this chicken that, you know, it came out right. But I had a lot to learn, you know. So through cooking books, there was a big cooking book library in the house. And through cooking with those books, which were from the top chefs like Paul Bocuse, Escoffier, Alain Ducasse, Mademoine, all these top French chefs. And then I started cooking these recipes, and I used to also get feedback from Dr. Dallas. Dr. Dallas at the time must have been in his late 70s. He was very, very well traveled, and he ate everywhere in all of the top restaurants. in France, in Italy, and so when he went to Mexico, he indulged into the Mexican food. Like he had a very broad knowledge of cooking, and I think he was a very talented cook himself. But his mentor told him that he shouldn't cook because otherwise the people around him was going to become fat. And he took that on, but the passion for the food was still there. So I mean, he used to give me new cooking books every like 2-3 months. I would have a new cooking book. I used to sit with him for hours discussing what we're going to do next, like what's going to be the next meal, how we're going to pair the different plates so it will be good for the digestion. It will be not too heavy, not too light. If it was winter, you needed more calories. So it was. We discussed all the details of preparing a meal. You know, who the guests that they were going to be, what was the best thing for those specific guests. So little by little, I start acquiring knowledge of it and I start learning about these things. One of the things that was new for me was the importance of the chef in the household, you know, because Dr. Dallas had a very aristocratic setup with a butler, with secretaries. There were all sort of different positions in the house. And yeah, what struck me was like the importance of the chef, you know. I always thought cooking was something that the woman did in the kitchen, you know. Yeah, they did the woman cook, you know, and the men do other things, you know. But yeah, the first thing that struck me is the importance of the chef in the household. Also talking to a captain from the ships, he also told me that yeah, the person who owns the ship is most important, obviously. Then it's the captain that drive the boat, and then is the doctor and the chef. Those are the most important people in the boat. So I mean that gave me a lot to think, you know, and to approach eating not just in the way of nourishment, but also in the way of the order of things, you know. Eating can be a discipline if you take it as such, you know. If you really look into it and make it a discipline, you will have the benefits of when you do something in order, you know. You will bring order to your life. You have to eat at least 2 times a day. The best thing is to eat maybe 4 times. So you have your breakfast in the morning, and then after the breakfast, that's a time that you dedicate for something. Then is the time for lunch, and you take a break from that activity that you were doing. And then after lunch is a new chapter to do new things or to be invigorated in what you were doing. If you just taking a break for lunch, you know, that will give you the energy to continue doing that activity with renewed energy. Then you have the time for tea, so that's another break. And after the tea, you might decide just to rest for a little bit or take it easy. And then it's the time for dinner. So I mean, if you give importance to these times, your day become order around these eating times, you know. Yeah, so that was the other thing that I start learning about is, hold on a second, you know, there is a discipline to it. You shouldn't eat every day at different times. For example, you should eat every day at the same time. You know, if you have breakfast at 9, between 9 and 10, have breakfast between 9 and 10 every day. If you have lunch between 1 and 2, then do that every day. And then the body gets used to it as well, and then, you know, nourishes the body in a much better way, you know. And then I mean, the most important thing that struck me is what the food brought into the situations. I mean, Dr. Dallas had a lot of friends. There was people invited for lunch every day, not just friends, but people that he was doing work with, or you know, any sort of activity. He will take the opportunity of the meal as a kickstart for events or for meetings or for just getting to know someone. So yeah, that's another thing that I start discovering is like, hold on a second, behind this thing that is just putting food in your mouth is much more to it, you know. How you honor your guest just by positioning in different chairs at table, you know. You sitting at the head of the table, and whoever you want to honor, you put closer to you, you know. As close as you put them, the bigger the honor. So the person on the right and the person on the left should be like the star guest. Then another thing that I started learning was about the manners of the table, the adapt or the respect that one should give food when you are going to eat it. From the preparation, from the acquirement of the ingredients, which, you know, when I buy meat, one of the things that I take care is that the animal is being like well treated. It's not mass produced meat slaughtered like God knows how, you know, animals in cages getting fed with antibiotics and, you know, other things. So yeah, all these things were taken in count. It wasn't just let's cook whatever comes our way, you know. It have to be chosen. So you really put your mind into it, and in that way you paying respect to the food and you honoring what you're gonna eat. The other important thing is the act of sitting at table. In Dr. Dallas' house, you always have to wear a tie and a jacket to sit at table, unless it was like 40 degrees, and then you were allowed to take your tie off. But yeah, being at your best, being present, being aware of the people who are serving you, that was very important. At the table, other things about the personality of the people emerges. And Dr. Dallas used to use the table as that. He said, like, what you miss in the saloon, you can see at table, you know. Then I learned something else. There is a psychology about food and a psychology about eating that I was completely unaware of. If you're a person eats too fast, what that means, if you're the person eat too slow, if he put too much food in his plate, if he's eating and he's carried away with the conversation and he's unaware that he's eating and is not paying attention to something that is being prepared and that have taken a lot of hours and a lot of effort to do, and you just dismissing it by not being present. I was also taken by that, you know, like, okay, so you can learn about other people just seeing how they eat, you know. That was fascinating, you know. You know, if the person made a comment about the food and said that was delicious, that was like a good sign, you know, like this man is sound, you know. And then after eating, you know, after eating, we usually had cigars, and sometimes I was invited to the cigars so I could see the other side of cooking, you know, which is being among the guests and benefiting from that. And you could see, you know, when the food was top quality, the energy in the room was thrilling, you know. The people were thriving, the conversation was high, you know, ideas were emerging, you know, things were happening. And yeah, I remember in one of these meetings there was magic in the room, and Dr. Dallas looked at me and he says, this is all because of you, you know. And then again I learned something new, like, okay, so hold on a second. Apart from eating is the what happens after you eat and the effect of that food in the people, you know. It can be positive or can be negative. If the food is heavy and it's too greasy and you have rushed eating in, then you're probably gonna get indigestion. You're not gonna be inspired to have a conversation, or you're not gonna be inspired to, you know, to do anything. It's gonna create a negative effect, and you're probably just gonna have a siesta, or, you know, or take something to relieve the pain.
So I'm curious, because you said as part of your journey, you said that, I mean, you started knowing next to nothing. And you were personally guided by Dr. Dallas to the highest of the world's cuisines. Now, I want to know a little bit more about that process, because you mentioned Dr. Dallas gave a lot of time to the importance of the meal, which therefore led on to the importance of the chef in the household, etc., etc. Now, what I want to know is, in the preparation of the menu for the next day, what was going on? How was that process? I mean, because you were obviously learning daily from it. What was going on in those interactions?
Well, they did evolve. I mean, in the beginning, Dr. Dallas will just give me a recipe and say, like, read this or cook this, or then we will start going through the books together, you know, and saying, oh, we could do this or we could do that, or, you know, take a few options. And then, I mean, we will really like shape it, you know. It was a come and forth of ideas, you know, and that was like the first cooking, you know, like putting the ideas all together, like chopping what you didn't like putting up other things, like adding an extra plate that might digest another plate, you know. It was, I don't know, it was artistic, scientific, political, and philosophical at the same time, you know. Yeah, artistics because you want like something that looks good, that tastes nice, that is presentable, you know, that is challenging, you know, new things. Then the technique, we used to choose of 20 recipes for the same thing, like the best possible one, you know, because he cooked the potatoes too long, or this one doesn't put salt in before, or like, you know, there was trying to make sense of the recipes before you even cook them. So for that you need that scientific brain of like, okay, this guy's putting too much sugar in the custard, you know, and I know it now because I done it before, and I know what's the chemistry. And then politically, because we were cooking for a selected few, and sometimes we will build the menu around the guest, you know.
Could you give an example of a menu that was specifically curated for a specific guest?
Yeah, I mean, the fresher example that comes to my mind is this time, actually I was cooking alone, but I already got this thinking from Dr. Dallas, and I remember Catherine Winnick was coming to have dinner with us in Dallas' house, and she's from Ukraine, from that side. So I made her a borscht, but a bit different, you know. But the spirit of the borscht was there, you know, of this Ukrainian traditional soup, you know. And yeah, I mean, the effect, the impact that did on her was visible, you know, like, and the comments that she made, and, you know. So why is that politically? Because you're really like rising to the level of that person, or like tickling her passions, or her, you know, emotions, or wherever it is, you know. And yeah, I mean, philosophical because I mean, you can make poetry out of food, you know, and talk about it for hours about, you know, what's the best apples are, why are the best apples, and, you know, what the apple is, you know. I mean, and it's also a lot of stories around food, you know, from everywhere, from every culture, from every angle.
So way before, you talked about if food is done properly, and a part of that is everything that happens in the kitchen. Now, you've specifically chosen this recipe, you've got the ingredients for that recipe, and now, lights, camera, action, you're in the kitchen. How does one guarantee that the ingredients metamorphose into something that's done correctly?
Well, I mean, it's a few factors. There are chefs that are much more scientific or mathematical than other chefs, you know. There is the ones that like to measure everything, you know, and everything has a measurement and a time, and you know, I like to cook a little bit more with the instinct. So by being there, by observation, by I come to the realization that in the kitchen, 2 plus 2 is not always 4, you know. So you might have a guide of measurements, but you need to have the eye and the feeling and the touch and the nose and the palate for it. You know, those are things that play a big role. Also, the technique is important, and as I say, you need a little bit of science as well. You know, and knowing the science before, like if you were in a lab to create a perfume or to create something else, you know. So yeah, part of it is science, and the other part is feeling. You have to have a both hand with hand, you know, because yeah, if you follow the science to the dot, you might not arrive to what you wanted. So you have to have the science, but at the same time you have to have the feeling and see what is happening in the process, you know, where you have to like get off the script, or you know, go right or go left or go a bit higher or lower, you know.
What's the most complex dish you've ever put together?
The most complex dish, well, once I did this thing that is, you have a turkey, and inside the turkey you put a duck, and inside the duck you put a quail, and then you stuff the quail. So yeah, I mean, it's, it's quite a complex one because you don't really know what's happening inside, especially if you don't have one of these temperature thermometers that I didn't have at the time. So, but with experience, everything becomes easier. The most complex dishes that you cook is always the first time you do them, you know. Yeah, I mean, there's ones that take a lot of time. There's ones that you have to be very precise for a very short time. You know, it will be difficult to like say like, yeah, this is the most difficult one. You know, one that gave me a lot of problems when I was learning how to cook is the Hollandaise sauce. You know, I mean, it's not a dish, but it's a sauce because I have to learn it by myself, and yeah, that was a nightmare. Like I got it wrong like so many times. uh, yeah, I had like thrown a bucket of eggs and butter like down the drain, you know, of all the failures. But I mean, once I learned how to do it, then it became so easy, you know. Like now it's super easy, you know. One of the things that took me a long time to do right was just simple tomato sauce pasta, you know. That's one of the things that have taken me the longest time to master, you know, or to do it up to the standards of Dr. Dallas, you know. One day he looked at me like, try not to be too hard on me, you know, and he said to me, you know, the thing is I had pasta with Fellini while the spaghetti were still drying in the olive trees, you know. So, so yeah, I would say pasta with tomato sauce was one of the challenges to get the right density of the sauce so it wraps the spaghetti with sauce sticking out throughout the spaghetti, but you don't have a bowl of soup once you have eaten your pasta, you know. Like all the sauce is gone with the pasta, there's nothing left in the plate. Funny enough, the salad dressings were actually quite difficult. First was the avocado dressing, which the way we do avocados in Dallas house is you cut the avo in half and you serve it with salad dressing. But I call it avo dressing, you know, because I wouldn't put this in any other salad. And yeah, that took me a long time to get it right. But when I got it right, like, yeah, now whoever tastes that is overwhelmed, you know, and it's just like avo and dressing, you know. That's all it is.
Okay. Fascinating. No, I was just thinking it's interesting because it's almost like the hardest or the most difficult things to do were those things that on the outward could almost be seen as the most simple. But in getting it to its place of perfection.
Yeah, there is where comes the famous French omelette, you know. You think you might be able to do, but to do it to perfection is a different world, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, it comes back to this book that I've been reading, The Art of Learning, and also drawing on the episode on jiu-jitsu. In the world of martial arts, even the most simple moves, you can do them again and again and again and again, and each time you tweak it ever so slightly until you've perfected it.
Yeah, and it's a killer move, you know.
Yeah, and then you go on to the next one, but it's something so simple, and in this case it's the author's talking about Tai Chi and this kind of push hand movements in Tai Chi. He was saying the point at which your opponent is blinking their eyes. He says for the split second they're blind.
Yeah.
And says if you can make your move timed perfectly in that split second, it's like they'll be on the floor and they didn't even realize how they got there. And they genuinely don't know. And he's talking about it like he was doing this with his partner. And then at one point he told his partner that was his trick. And then he had to go to another level because then his partner knew that when he blinked, it was when the guy was going to attack. But it's like you see that when you get to the levels of mastery, it's the devil's in the details. You know, it's the most simple things, but it's there. And you can use it to your advantage.
And the other thing that because I was working for a writer, we also used to link a lot of the cooking to literature. You know, we cook recipes from Alexander Dumas. You know, we have the super mules from Alexander Dumas. You know, which is one of the nicer things I have actually cooked. That's one of the best. Which is 3 soups that are combined into one. You do a beef broth, you do a tomato soup, and you do a mussels broth.
Oh.
Yeah. Then you combine them all together, reduce it, and cook it for hours. It's something that takes hours. That's one of the top dishes I will say that I have done. We used to also do this 12-hour leg of lamb from Colette. And that was the anecdote that, the guest of Colette complimented the food and said that you could eat it with a spoon. And it takes 12 hours. So it's, yeah, it's a whole experience, So, yeah, I mean, if we found any recipes in even novels sometimes, so, we will give it thought and try to replicate it. So I mean, food apart is also, it has a big connection to culture, to culture and to any other art, especially to literature, because a lot of the writers, they will put in their stories like something that they have eat. Yeah, there is a big connection between food and literature,
I'm even thinking now is like what you were saying earlier is telling a story through the food, like with the example of Catherine Winnick. You were creating a narrative through the food. So when you put that bowl of borscht in front of her, I mean, that's a whole story for her.
Yeah, first she recognized that she was the guest of honor, because there was a specific dish created for her, to bring her memories of her homeland. As an actress, you probably don't spend a lot of time in your hometown. Another thing is if you have flown straight from there and then you are like, okay, they're giving me the same as in my country. But if you put it in context and one or two details about the person, you can honor them in ways.
From your perspective, 16 years, day in, day out, meticulously deciding the menu, going to the shops and getting the right ingredients so that you have all the raw materials to create alchemy in the kitchen, produce these amazing dishes that were being served at table and inspiring these creative and expansive conversations. Why do you think Dr. Dallas gave so much importance and time and effort to the food and the event of the dining room?
What is that expression? The proof is in the pudding, you know. I mean, you have to be in one of these rooms and feel the energy to really appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, if you eat good food and you do it, as I say, in the proper manner, which is all that we've been discussing, then the result is inspirational. You know, you get inspired, you get cured, you get revigorated by food. You can honor people with food. I mean, it's a lot of layers to it. I mean, it's a great pleasure as well. You know, the taste, the flavors. It's a pleasure for all ages and all races, all sexes. You know, everyone needs to eat. You know, and everybody can benefit from the pleasure of eating good food. You know.
So how can one take from your experience and your learning and implement that in their lives if they don't have the same, let's say, outward setup of, you mentioned Dr. Dallas had a very aristocratic household. He had a butler, chef, doctor, etc. Now, how could one take that form, like, to distill it to its absolute essence? How can one replicate that essence?
I mean, you have to make an effort to do it, you know. Even if you have a small kitchen, even if you have just potatoes, you can still replicate it, you know, if you put enough care and enough time and enough worry into these ingredients that you have, even if they are very basic. You know, you can cook the potatoes 24 hours in sunflower oil and you're gonna see the result of the potatoes by cooking it in a very low heat for a very long time. And then you might be poor, you might not have a lot, but what you have is top quality, is fit for a king, you know. Yeah, as I say, it's an effort, you know, and it's a discipline. You have to want to implement that in your life. It have to be almost a way of living, you know. Yeah, I mean, if you jump out of bed and you need to be at work and you're late, now you miss breakfast or you just have it on the go, that breakfast is not gonna give you the same boost, and it's not gonna nourish you as if you wake up, lay down a tray with nice china, cook your eggs like very specifically, you know how to combine ingredients as well. That's very important, especially when you talk about the healthy aspect of food, what healthy food is. For example, Dr. Dallas, he never had eggs without orange juice, because the orange juice will help the egg to be digested, and in that way you don't get this cholesterol and these other problems, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's almost a way of living and a discipline that you have to acquire, you know. You have to make an effort for it. Yeah, it's not gonna come on its own, you know. Unfortunately. And also there is a bit of a misconception of what healthy food is. Like there is meat has these connotations that is unhealthy, you know. But it's a lot to do with what meat are you eating in first place. You know, are you eating a battery chicken, or are you eating a chicken that have been able to bath in the sun and do the things that they do with earth, and, you know, eat some worms and, you know, have a dignified life. And then, you know, what are you pairing it with, you know, because some ingredients will help digest the other ingredients. You know, if you have if you cooking lamb, for example, and you want to make it healthier, you want to make something that goes through the system easy and doesn't take too much effort in the stomach or the liver or any of the organs to digest that. There is techniques that you can do, like marinating it, let's say for example in papaya. The enzymes of the papaya start breaking down the fat particles and start digesting the food for you already. So yeah, that lamb that is being well raised and is have some time of marinating, then you cook it for a long period of time, and then when you eat it, you pair it with things that as well will help the digestion of the lamb. So maybe you finish the lunch with pineapples, that also have that quality of helping the digestion. So yeah, I mean, healthy food. If you have good ingredients, you cook it well, and you don't eat too much of any specific thing. You eat a little bit of everything, then everything is healthy food. It's, you can indulge in little things that, yeah, maybe if you eat a lot it's not healthy, but if you eat a little bit, it's healthy. Yeah.
The divine table, the Last Supper. I mean, I know in the chivalric history, the table was of great importance. It was an event, but it was also bonding and a place where people came together.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's the politics of the table. If you watch the series The Tudors, there is that scene where the King of France just give a massive, I think it's a collar of jewels, pearls and diamonds and whatnot, and he give that to King Henry as this amazing present. And then when it's the time of King Henry VIII to honor the King of France, he brings in a pie, like a very big pie, and the King of France is a bit like taken back, like, I don't know, is this sort of joke, or like, don't you have anything better to offer? But then he takes the knife and then he digs the knife in the pie, and birds come out of the pie, and it's a huge like applause from everybody there, and yeah, I mean, it's that element of politics, it's like, you have given me a thing of jewels, but I'm gonna give you something that you can almost pay with money, unless you have my chef.
There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that a man came to him with a plate of cucumber and dates, and the Prophet ﷺ took a bag of jewels and gave it back to him. And you've just opened my mind to a completely different understanding of that hadith. I mean, it shows on multiple levels, one, the Prophet ﷺ's immense generosity, but in another way it also shows the value of feeding somebody or giving somebody food and nourishment and medicine and health.
Yeah, and I mean, if the person gave the best that they had, that is also one of the meanings. You give me the very best, and if the very best is a sweet cucumber, then that counts as if you were giving like a bag of diamonds. Yeah, and the amazing thing, in the modern days where people don't have time to eat, I got a book in the Mughal emperor's cuisine, and at the back of the book explains when they are in the campaign at war what took for them to what was how will they have breakfast. So if they were in a camp, the kitchen will move first, with all the gears, and they had like 50 cows, 50 donkeys to like carry all the crockery. I mean, it was a little army on its own. They had chickens for eggs. They had a whole wall, a little army on its own, just for food, and for the emperors, he had several chefs, and only one plate was expected from each chef, so, and that was in times of war, when you are when you are in a battlefield, and you're gonna face the enemy, and you may or may not survive, and you may or may not win, you may lose the war, but they knew the importance of eating, they knew what brings about, There is a line that says, the fate of nations depends in how they eat or in what they eat. And I mean, it's very true. One of the things that I discovered, just by observing a little bit history, and behind every empire, there is a source of carbs, potatoes, like in South America, the corn, the rice, the wheat, they always had a source of carbohydrates. So I mean, that puts a little bit in perspective that line. The fate of nations depends of how they eat. The key of expansion was that they had enough food to feed everybody. Yeah, and that's how they could carry these armies forward, based on food.
I mean, that's a massive part of the logistics of war.
Yeah, not just war, even peace, If you have a huge empire and you are at peace, they still need to eat, When there was shortage of grain in Rome, you saw what happened, There was chaos. It's a way of showing power as well. I mean, Napoleon used to have a table with 50 seats, You can display your power on the table, You don't always have to show your guns, You can also do it throughout a table with many seats, everything meticulous, spotless, extravagant dishes with extravagant things in it, I like again, going back to literature, I really like this chapter where in the Count of Monte Cristo, when El Mundo, the Count of Monte Cristo, yeah, he comes, I think, from Russia or from some faraway land, and he brings fish from that land, and he said that he brings 2 fishes in a barrel, in case one dies, he still have the other one, and the impact that makes in the guests, in the event, you have this exotic fish that comes from the other side of the wall and is still alive, how much trouble did he went through to get this fish, how much did he pay for it, probably will blow your mind. Then you see the president of the United States eating McDonald's, and you wonder.
Talking about the fate of nations depends on what they eat. What came to my mind were the kind of 2 contemporary extremes of, on the one side, you've got America and fast food and huge portions and highly processed chemicals, you name it. And that's the kind of state of, you could say, the masses of the United States. And then on the other side of the political divide, you've got China and the horrendous things that you see. I mean, I've seen the foul videos of people eating live frogs and toads, and it's almost looking at the kind of contemporary world of food and the state of these nations. It almost seems that, I mean, we've reached end times.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that line, the fate of nations depends on the way they eat, is because if you constantly are eating junk food, your intellect is gonna deteriorate. Your capacity of doing things is gonna deteriorate. You are losing all the aspects of food, such as the inspirational aspect that brings, the political aspect that we were speaking about, that brings, because if you're gonna take someone to McDonald's, I mean, you're just revealing yourself as not a very interesting person, not a strong ally, if you want to put it somehow. Then the thing of after the food, you're gonna feel heavy, you're not gonna have energy, you're gonna burn more energy trying to digest that food than the actually energy that you're gonna take from the food. And I mean, one thing about food is it's just constantly absorbing energy. Since day one, when you put a seed in the ground, that seed is gonna attract to itself a specific energy. The way that that food is being processed is gonna attract to it a different energy. The way it is being cooked is gonna put into it a different energy, and that energy is the energy that you're gonna use to go into your everyday life. So if that energy is not good quality, then don't expect good results. It's like if you have a car, you try to put the top oil into the engine and you try to put the top gas.
Fascinating, eh? It's like, I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Tell me what you eat and I'll tell you what you are. Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, part of yourself is your energy, and energy is not created. Energy is transferred. So where did you get that energy from? If it's good quality energy, then expect good results. If it's low quality energy, then expect lower results. In your everyday performance. In the building of your character. And I think it's happening already, because of how the world situation is, and with coronavirus and how that is impacting the restaurants, and because restaurant was a phenomenon that started occurring after the aristocracy was done with, because in the aristocratic houses they always used to have chefs, and when that way of living was gone, then these people, what they did is they start opening restaurants, and I think I don't know, but I think it might naturally go back to how it was, because the restaurants are closing down, and the whole thing is shrinking. And I think a good solution, even for corporations that have a lot of employees, business firms, and things like that, I think the logical thing is going to be to go back to have personal chefs. If you have a building and it's 200 people working there, then look at providing food for these people, and have your own kitchens and have your own chef and have your own dynamic around food. I think we will see a bit more of that in the future, because it's already like becoming very fashionable to have a private chef. So the personal chef is when the chef lives with you, and the private chef is when you hire him to do a specific dinner, and it's becoming more and more popular, So that is almost going back to that thing where you had a personal chef, and anybody who can afford to have a personal chef should have a personal chef and practice that we were talking about, structurizing the lives, the meetings, the activities around food. That will really change their lives, and make them stronger in every sense, And then when you have a business meeting, try to invite them to your house, sit them in the salon until the food is ready, bring them for lunch, make a whole almost a ceremony. It's an event, that is do it as an event, and see what happens, and see what happens. I see that as a key element for the fulfillment of life, that sharing food and that whole energy that happens around food, if you do it right.
What I'm hearing from you is it all boils down to discipline. And I came across a line the other day, which is self-discipline is telling yourself you're going to do something and doing it.
Yeah.
So it's telling yourself you're going to make an effort to eat well
and to be constant in your effort. That's the thing. So maybe start with one meal a day, you know, that you are like, okay, this time of the day is sacred. I remember growing up, lunchtime was everything stopped, and in Spain is one of the countries where it's still, especially for lunchtime. I remember the shops were closed for lunch, and so they will open the shop in the morning until lunchtime, which is around 2, and then close the shop and then open it back like at 5. It was there, you know, little by little is getting lost, you know. Also, people don't cook in their homes that much anymore, you know. So
Time and discipline.
yeah, and we all have time to cook. I mean, this thing of we don't have time when you like then spending like 3 hours in social media, you know. You're gonna spend these hours even in social media while you have a stew cooking in the oven, you know. It's, maybe the whole process is 4 hours, but the preparation is half an hour, you know, and that's it. You just have to remember to stir it time to time and to take it out of the oven at the right time, you know. So I mean, I think food just bring much more than just nutrition, you know.
Well, at the end of the day, it's an integral, necessary part of life. If you don't eat, you'll die. And so take that
Take that necessity and make it a pleasure, you know.
and raise it to its highest.
And raise it to its highest. If you have simple ingredients, do it with simple ingredients. There is a lot of dishes in European culture that are post-war dishes that they created after the war when there was nothing, you know. Make migas out of breadcrumbs, you know. You take hard bread, which feels like you cannot do anything with it, and throw on top like a few things, you know, and you see the result, you know. But that comes with a little bit of dedication, a little bit of thought, you know, and then you will get a result that gives you a vast amount of pleasure, you know.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the New Nomos podcast. On the topic of the table, I think we could have taken this conversation in so many different ways, and there are so many subsequent themes that we could have touched on and delved into. But with that said, there's no doubt that Chef Yusuf Perez really gave justice to such a weighty topic. Now, to seal this episode, I want to read out the words of Dr. Dallas himself, where he talks about the service of the table and its importance. The heart of hospitality is the table. This has before it the act of welcome, and after it the act of farewell. The further the prince goes out from his apartments to greet his guests, the higher they are honored. But it is at the table that the mark of distinction is made by the host. The prince may buttle the meal, supervising the service and checking the food, moving in and out. However, for the important guests, the prince should preside at table, honoring to the one seated on his right and his left. The prince's table may be gourmet, but it must not be gourmand. Well-prepared dishes can be eaten lightly. Heavy foods tend to make people gluttons. Tending to the guests' needs at table is a duty of the prince, using a watchful but unperceived eye over each one. Also, at table, the prince may observe what he missed in the saloon. That will show him the soundness or otherwise of the guest. The table is the arena of harmony and welcome, but it is also a place of discrimination. And that brings this episode to a close. Thank you once again for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the New Nomos podcast. Thank you.